Amara woke each day to the cold clink of chains. The heavy iron links wrapped tightly around her ankle were a constant reminder that she was not free. Though the sun rose high over the village, flooding the sky with warmth and light, inside her father's house shadows ruled. Thick walls closed in, windows barred, and the air hung heavy with a silence so profound it pressed on her chest like a weight. The faint crackle of distant voices from outside was a cruel reminder of a world she could see but never touch. Her father's house was an ancient stone structure, weathered by time yet proud in its decay. The courtyard was choked with thorny bushes and weeds that had long gone untended, and the wooden door groaned every time it opened, letting in the stale breath of the outside world. Inside, the floors were cold and cracked and the rooms were bare except for the essentials. The sparse furniture seemed to mock Amara's captivity, each piece a silent witness to her confinement. Each morning Amara struggled to rise. The chains bit into her skin as she moved, but they were more than metal, they were a symbol of her father's iron grip. Her wrists bore faint scars from old wounds, marks she hid beneath long sleeves. She knew the chain was as much psychological as physical, designed to break her spirit as much as to restrain her body. No one in the village spoke openly of why Amara was chained. When whispered questions rose in the marketplace or among the elders, the answers were always hushed, evasive, or met with averted eyes. Some claimed her father was protecting her from a curse that stalked their bloodline, others muttered of sins so deep that the very soil beneath their feet was stained. But none dared say the truth aloud. Inside the house, Amara's days were filled with solitude and routine. She awoke with the first light, her chains rattling softly as she stretched. She washed with cold water from a cracked clay jar, the chill biting into her skin. Meals were simple, a piece of dry bread, some sour milk, slid through a small hatch in the heavy door by a servant who dared not meet her eyes. There were no pleasures, no comfort, only the dull ache of longing for freedom. She spent hours staring out of the barred window, watching children run through the fields, their laughter floating like music she could never join. The birds outside sang melodies she had forgotten how to dream. Time itself seemed to crawl, marking each day as another link added to her chain. Despite the isolation, Amara was far from broken. Her eyes, dark and quiet, held a steady flame that refused to be extinguished. There was a resilience born from suffering, a silent promise that she would not disappear into the shadows cast by her father's fear. Her father, an imposing man named Obesai, rarely visited. When he did, his presence filled the house like a storm cloud. His face was worn, etched with lines deeper than age alone could explain. There was a hardness in his gaze, a suspicion that seemed directed not only at Amara but at the world beyond his walls. Whispers spoke of his past, of debts owed, promises broken, and a secret he guarded jealously. Some said he had made a terrible pact, one that cursed his bloodline and forced him to imprison his own daughter to keep the darkness at bay. On rare evenings when Obesai sat by the fire, the flickering flames cast eerie shadows across his face. He would stare into the fire for hours, muttering prayers or curses under his breath. Sometimes in the stillness, Amara thought she heard him speak her name, laden with sorrow and fear. Though the house was filled with silence, it was never peaceful. The heavy chains clanked with every movement, the cold stone walls seemed to close in tighter with each passing day, and the unspoken secrets hung thick in the air like a suffocating fog. Amara had long ceased to hope for rescue from outside. The village's fear of her family was so great that no one dared to challenge Obesai. Even the servants moved cautiously, their faces pale and voices low. They passed her meals with trembling hands but never lingered to offer comfort. In the quiet hours of the night, Amara traced the cold metal links with trembling fingers, wondering about the secrets they held, not just the iron forged around her ankle, but the chains of silence that bound her family. Each link seemed to whisper a story, a hidden truth buried beneath layers of fear and shame. Though she was imprisoned, Amara's mind was alive, piecing together fragments of stories overheard, watching her father's rare visits, and holding tight to the hope that one day the chains might break, not just the ones on her ankle but those that bound her family's dark past. Her life was a fragile balance between despair and defiance, between silence and the quiet yearning for freedom that pulsed beneath her skin like a secret heartbeat. She was chained, yes, but not defeated. And in that unyielding spirit lay a promise that even the darkest secrets could not bury forever. The sun outside dipped low, painting the sky with deep oranges and purples. Amara settled back against the cold stone wall, chains clinking softly. She closed her eyes, imagining a world beyond these walls, a world where she was free, where the truth no longer hid in shadows, and where the secrets buried by her father could finally see the light. Until then she waited, chained yes but unbroken. Amara's father, Obesai, was a man consumed by shadows, not the shadows cast by the setting sun, but those born deep in the recesses of his mind and heart. His paranoia was a fortress, a thick wall built brick by brick with fear, superstition, and a desperate need to control the fate of his family. To understand why he chained his daughter within the cold stone walls of their ancestral home, one must delve into the tangled roots of his dread, and the secrets he buried beneath his stern exterior. Obesai was once a man full of ambition and pride, a respected figure in the village who carried the weight of his ancestors with reverence. His family had long been guardians of tradition and keepers of sacred knowledge, a lineage both revered and feared by those around them. But with honor came curses, old curses whispered in the darkest corners of the village, tales of bloodlines cursed to bring ruin unless shackled by harsh rituals and sacrifices. From the moment Amara was born, Obesai's joy was tempered by an invisible burden. The elders warned him of omens, the strange markings on Amara's skin, the way her eyes sometimes flickered with unnatural light, or how animals avoided her presence without reason. Superstition crept like ivy around Obesai's heart, wrapping tighter with each passing year. The fear that his daughter carried a curse, a stain that could doom their family, gnawed at his soul. Obesai was haunted by dreams filled with fire and shadow. In these nightmares, his house burned while Amara wept chains that grew longer and heavier. Faces from the past appeared, accusing and silent, reminding him of a debt unpaid. The fear was not just for himself, it was for the family name, the legacy entrusted to him. The thought of scandal, of whispered rumors reaching ears beyond the village, kept him awake in cold sweats. The burden twisted him, changing the warmth in his eyes to cold suspicion. Obesai became a man obsessed with control, convinced that the only way to protect his lineage was to isolate the source of danger, his own daughter. To the outside world he was a stern patriarch, strict but fair. Behind closed doors he was a jailer, wielding chains not just of iron but of silence and fear. Each day, Obesai's mind churned with thoughts of safeguarding his family from ruin. He forbade Amara from speaking to neighbors or friends. Any letters or visitors were intercepted. The village, sensing his harshness, whispered their own fears, that Obesai was hiding dark secrets, and that Amara was both a victim and a symbol of something sinister. His paranoia extended beyond Amara. He kept a close eye on the servants, trusting no one fully. Rumors of his past mistakes added fuel to his paranoia. Years ago, a failed business deal had left him indebted to a mysterious figure rumored to deal in dark magic. Some believed this was the source of the curse he so desperately feared. Obesai's control tightened as Amara grew older. He chained her not just physically but emotionally, forbidding her from looking out the windows for too long or speaking unless spoken to. Every word she uttered was measured and judged. His home became a prison where every shadow held a secret, and every silence screamed warnings. His wife, Amara's mother, had died under mysterious circumstances soon after her birth, leaving Obesai alone with his fears and his daughter. Some whispered that the mother's death was tied to the same curse that now threatened to unravel the family. Whether by guilt or fear, Obesai's love for Amara was entangled with suspicion and control. Obesai's fear was not entirely without cause. There were moments when the village suffered misfortunes. The crops failed, children fell ill, strange illnesses that no healer could cure. Villagers pointed fingers, some in secret, some openly, at Amara and her family. Obesai, believing the curse was real, doubled down on his efforts to keep her confined, hoping to stave off disaster. His obsession alienated him from the community. Friends and allies drifted away, fearful of the dark aura surrounding his household. The village elders offered no counsel, wary of interfering in matters so deeply rooted in superstition. Obesai's isolation grew, mirroring the physical chains he placed on his daughter. Within the house, Obesai maintained a strict routine, one designed to minimize risk. Amara's movements were monitored, meals prepared carefully to avoid tainted ingredients, and the rooms were cleansed regularly with herbs and prayers to ward off evil spirits. Obesai sought the counsel of local shamans, paying handsomely for rituals that promised protection. Yet the fear persisted, unrelenting and gnawing. Despite his harshness, there were rare moments when Obesai's resolve faltered. Late at night, he would stand outside Amara's door, listening to her quiet breaths, his hand trembling on the iron lock. In those moments, the father within fought the prisoner's keeper, torn between love and fear. But love twisted by paranoia was a cruel thing. Obesai's decisions, born from dread, chained Amara more tightly than iron ever could. His vision of protecting the family name had become a prison of silence and shadow. And so, as the village slept, the father and daughter remained locked in a tragic dance. One driven by fear, bound by secrets, and haunted by the shadows of a past that refused to die. Obesai's hidden fear was the catalyst of a story no one dared speak aloud. A story of control, sacrifice, and the desperate measures taken to bury secrets best left forgotten. Yet, in the depths of his heart, a question lingered, unspoken and unresolved. Was the curse real, or was it the chains themselves that held the true darkness? The dim corridors of Obesai's house were rarely filled with laughter or light. Instead, the servants moved like shadows, their whispers barely louder than the creak of the ancient wooden floorboards beneath their feet. Behind closed doors and heavy curtains, rumors grew like weeds, twisting and turning in the air, all centered on the girl who lived chained within the stone walls, Amara. The servants came from different parts of the village, some young, some old, each carrying their own fears and secrets. For many, the house was more a prison than a home, the heavy silence a constant reminder of the power wielded by Obesai, the father who held tight the reins of control, not just over his daughter but over every soul who served under his roof. Among them, stories passed from one to another like whispered prayers or curses, depending on who told them. Some believed the chains were necessary, that Amara was dangerous in ways they did not understand. The father keeps her bound for a reason, they said in hushed tones. Some say she carries a curse, or worse that she is cursed herself. Others pitied her quietly, avoiding the subject lest they draw the wrath of their master. She's just a girl, a soft voice murmured one evening near the kitchen hearth. What harm could she possibly do, chained like that? But fear always lurked beneath sympathy. To speak openly was to risk punishment, or worse. Some servants had seen what happened to those who crossed Obesai. Sudden disappearances, harsh reprimands, and a coldness that chilled the bones. Even small acts of kindness toward Amara were watched, and any sign of rebellion was crushed swiftly. In the shadows of the household lived a young servant named Kofi, small in stature but large in courage. Unlike others, Kofi did not avert his gaze when he saw Amara through the narrow gaps in the doors. Instead, he watched with quiet compassion, noticing the flicker of life behind her tired eyes. Kofi knew the risks. He was new to the house, barely trusted by the older servants, but he had a heart that refused to turn away. One rainy afternoon, when the house was silent except for the drip of water from the leaking roof, Kofi found himself near the kitchen where Amara's meals were delivered through a small hatch. He waited until the footsteps of the others faded, then softly called her name. Amara? The voice startled her at first, but then relief softened her expression. Kofi, you're not supposed to speak to me. I know, he whispered. But I can't pretend I don't see you. From that day, a fragile friendship blossomed. Kofi began leaving small gifts, a fresh fruit, a carved wooden figure, a clean cloth, anything to bring comfort to a girl whose world was limited by iron links and fear. But their friendship was not without danger. Rumors began swirling among the servants. Some whispered that Kofi was foolish, that his kindness would bring disaster. Others admired his bravery in the face of Obesai's cold rule. One evening, the head servant, a stern woman named Ya, confronted Kofi. You're treading on thin ice, she warned. Obesai's eyes are everywhere. If you're caught, it will not be just you who suffers. Kofi nodded, but his resolve did not waver. I only want to give her hope. Hope was a rare commodity in the household. The servants spoke of it in stolen moments, recalling tales of girls who had been set free, of curses broken and chains undone. But those were stories told far away in distant villages. Here in Obesai's house, hope felt like a fragile ember barely holding back the dark. As days passed, Kofi learned more of Amara's story, bits and pieces she dared to share in whispered words. She spoke of her loneliness, her longing for freedom, and the heavy burden of secrets that weighed on her family. She revealed how the chains were not just physical restraints but symbols of the fears that shackled her father's heart. Through these conversations, Kofi's sympathy grew into determination. He began to think of ways to ease Amara's confinement, small acts of rebellion against the silence that bound them both. Meanwhile, the other servants observed quietly. Some began to see Amara not as a cursed girl but as a person, someone worthy of kindness and maybe even rescue. Slowly, a subtle shift took place in the household. Servants who had once avoided her began leaving extra food, soft blankets, or whispered prayers for her freedom. Yet the fear of Obesai's wrath always loomed. The house was filled with tension, a fragile web woven from secrets and silent resistance. One night, as the wind howled outside and the rain beat against the roof, Kofi slipped a small note through the hatch to Amara. It was a simple message: "You are not alone." Amara clutched the paper to her chest, tears slipping down her cheeks. For the first time in months she felt a spark, a fragile but real connection to the world beyond her chains. The servants' whispers continued, carrying tales of courage and quiet defiance. And though the house remained a place of shadows and secrets, the seeds of hope had been planted, nurtured by the kindness of one small servant who dared to see Amara not as a prisoner but as a friend. In the silence that followed, behind locked doors and iron bars, a promise was made, that no matter how heavy the chains, no one should ever be truly alone. Amara's chains were not ordinary shackles forged only to restrain flesh and bone. They were ancient, heavy links of iron blackened by time and ritual, each forged with purpose and meaning far beyond their cold exterior. At first glance they seemed cruel and merciless, the simple instruments of captivity. But as her fingers traced the worn edges and etched markings, Amara sensed a deeper story hidden within each link. Symbols, faint but deliberate, twisted across the metal like an ancient script, waiting to be read by someone who dared to look. 4 years, Amara had been bound by these chains, confined to her father's house, left to wonder at the reasons for her imprisonment. Whispers from the servants hinted at curses and sins long buried beneath the weight of silence, but no one ever spoke plainly. Until one restless night, when shadows deepened and the moonlight cast silvery patterns across her stone floor, Amara's curiosity overcame fear. She began to examine the chains closely, determined to uncover the truth locked within their cold embrace. The first link she studied bore a symbol resembling a serpent coiled around a tree, its head raised as if guarding something precious. Her mother had once told her stories of the serpent's covenant, a pact between a family and the spirits of the land, a promise of protection in exchange for sacrifice. Could these chains be a reminder of that ancient vow? Or were they a warning of a curse that had taken root in her bloodline? Next, her fingers traced a series of intertwined triangles, symbols she recognized from the village elders' carvings, representing balance and the three forces of life: birth, death, and rebirth. The chains were more than shackles. They were a record of her family's story, a secret language her father had never dared to explain. As days passed, Amara carefully studied every link, piecing together the cryptic messages hidden in the ironwork. She discovered patterns that matched the faded markings in an old book she found buried beneath the floorboards of her room, a journal once owned by her grandfather, a man shrouded in mystery and silence. The journal spoke of mistakes, betrayals, and a dark debt owed to powers beyond mortal understanding. The more Amara learned, the clearer the picture became. Her father's actions, the chains, the isolation, they were all attempts to contain something dangerous. Not just a curse on her, but a sin on their family tree, buried deep and festering beneath generations. The journal revealed a story of greed and broken promises. Her great-grandfather, a man named Kofi, had once sought power beyond what was granted to mortals. In his desire to protect his family and secure prosperity, he had made a pact with shadowy forces, trading the family's honor for temporary wealth and influence. But such bargains came with a price. When Kofi failed to uphold his end, the curse took root, twisting the bloodline and threatening to destroy everything his descendants held dear. Amara realized that the chains were not just physical restraints but magical seals, each link a lock on the darkness her family had unleashed. Her father's fear was not unfounded. He was guarding a secret that could unravel their entire lineage. Yet there was hope hidden within the symbols as well. The intertwined triangles spoke of rebirth and the possibility of breaking cycles. The serpent's protective posture hinted that if the right steps were taken, the curse might be lifted and freedom reclaimed. With each discovery, Amara's resolve grew stronger. She was no longer just a prisoner but a seeker of truths hidden in the cold metal that bound her. The chains that once symbolized her imprisonment now became keys, clues guiding her toward the redemption her family desperately needed. Late into the nights, she practiced deciphering the symbols, committing their meanings to memory. She traced the faded words in the journal, learning ancient rituals and prayers forgotten by time. In the quiet solitude of her confinement, Amara transformed from a girl shackled by fear into a woman armed with knowledge and purpose. Her newfound understanding also changed the way she saw her father. Obeisai's harshness, his paranoia, it all stemmed from the burden of a secret he was desperate to protect, a weight he carried alone. The chains were as much a prison for him as for her, forged from guilt and fear. But the chain's magic was neither infallible nor unbreakable. Amara sensed that the power holding her captive was tied to her father's belief and the curse's strength. If she could unravel the truth and confront the darkness beneath, she might find a way to break the chains, both literal and spiritual, that bound her. One afternoon, as a pale sun filtered through the barred window, Amara found a small, nearly invisible inscription on the inside of the last link. It was a phrase in an ancient tongue, a prayer of binding and release. Her heart pounded as she whispered the words, feeling a faint warmth spread from the metal into her skin. Though nothing immediately changed, Amara knew she had taken the first step toward freedom. The chains, once symbols of her imprisonment, now held the secrets of her family's past, and perhaps the path to her future. The village had always been a quiet place, nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, where the past clung like morning mist and the present moved at a slow, deliberate pace. But one day the steady rhythm of life was interrupted by the arrival of a stranger. He came with the dust of distant roads on his clothes and a look in his eyes that spoke of secrets carried from far beyond the village's borders. The traveler's name was Ghanian. Tall and lean, with a weathered face etched by sun and wind, he moved through the village with a purpose that drew curious glances from the villagers. Whispers followed him like shadows. Some called him a wanderer, others a seeker of lost truths, and a few even murmured of dark magic. Ghanian was no ordinary visitor. He carried knowledge of things most dared not speak aloud, ancient curses, forgotten rituals, and the heavy chains that bound one particular family for generations. It was this knowledge that brought him to the village and more specifically to the house of Obesai, where Amara lived imprisoned. From the moment Ghanian arrived, a quiet tension settled over the village. Those who knew the story of the chain girl watched him with wary eyes. Rumors spread swiftly. Had he come to break the curse or to deepen it? Had the family called for help, or had fate sent a reckoning? Ghanian's path was not one of casual interest. He had traveled great distances following faint clues, old manuscripts, cryptic maps, and word of a girl bound not just by iron but by secrets long buried. His journey had been driven by more than curiosity. It was a mission fueled by the weight of history and a personal vow to right ancient wrongs. When he finally stood before Obesai's gate, Ghanian's presence was met with suspicion. The father's eyes, sharp and wary, measured the stranger's every move. But Ghanian spoke with calm certainty, revealing knowledge only a true seeker would possess. He spoke of the serpent's covenant, the intertwined triangles, and the binding prayers whispered through generations. The household buzzed with unease as Ghanian's words spread. To many his arrival was a beacon of hope, to others, a harbinger of disruption. Ghanian's first encounter with Amara was cautious yet profound. Under the cover of night, when the house slept under the watchful eyes of stone statues and iron bars, he found a way to speak to her. Their meeting was brief, shrouded in secrecy and the unspoken weight of expectation. He told her that he knew the chains were not mere metal but vessels of magic tied to her family's sins and sacrifices. He promised that with knowledge, courage and ritual, those chains could be broken. But the path to freedom would not be easy. It would require confronting shadows that had long haunted the family, and risking everything to reclaim her life. Amara, weary but hopeful, listened. For the first time, someone spoke to her not with fear or suspicion, but with understanding and determination. Ghanian's arrival rekindled a spark of possibility. The villagers, watching from afar, sensed a change, a shift in the air that whispered of truths ready to surface and chains ready to fall. Yet, as the stranger settled into the village's rhythms, tensions grew. Obesai's suspicion deepened, and the household's walls seemed to tighten. The father's grip on his daughter grew more desperate, fearing that the stranger might unravel the carefully woven web of secrets he had maintained for so long. Amara found herself caught between two worlds, the oppressive silence of her father's house and the cautious hope brought by the stranger. Together, she and Ghanian began to prepare for the journey ahead, one that would challenge old curses, confront buried sins, and seek the light hidden beneath generations of darkness. The traveler's arrival marked the beginning of a reckoning. The chains that bound Amara were no longer just iron and magic. They were the first threads of a story that would unravel the past and shape the future. Amara and Ghanian sat in whispered conversation beneath the veil of night, the flickering candlelight casting trembling shadows on the cold stone walls of her confinement. The air was thick with tension and hope, two forces locked in a fragile dance as they plotted a way out of the prison her father had forged around her. The chains on her ankle clinked softly with every movement, a stark reminder of the urgency and danger that hung over their plan. Their escape would not be simple. The house was heavily guarded, not just by Obesai's watchful eyes but by an atmosphere thick with fear and suspicion. Servants moved silently through the corridors, doors were bolted tight, and the village itself seemed to hold its breath. Obesai, once stern, had grown even more paranoid since Ikon's arrival, tightening his grip on both Amara and those around her. Every whispered conversation, every furtive glance was met with harsh rebukes and threats. Yet, despite the risks, the fire of freedom burned bright within Amara. She refused to be bound forever, and with Ikon's knowledge of the ancient magic behind her chains, there was a chance, however slim, to break free. Their plan was meticulous. It began with small steps, gathering information about the household's routines, noting when guards changed shifts, and identifying moments when security might be weakest. Ikon, familiar with the rituals that sustained the chain's power, instructed Amara in subtle ways to weaken their magic, teaching her to recite prayers and use symbols etched into the links. They enlisted the help of Kofi, the young servant who had shown kindness to Amara. His knowledge of the house's inner workings and the movements of its inhabitants proved invaluable. Together they mapped secret passages, hidden doors, and blind spots in the security. One key element of their plan involved creating a distraction. They knew Obesai's attention was heavily focused on Amara, but the household was large and old, filled with creaking floorboards and unpredictable sounds. Ikon prepared a ritual to ignite a small fire in the farthest wing of the house, enough to cause alarm but not devastation. The resulting chaos would buy precious minutes for Amara's escape. As they rehearsed their roles in hushed voices, Amara felt the weight of every decision. One misstep could mean harsher chains, punishment, or worse. But the thought of freedom, the taste of open air, the sight of the sun unbarred, was a beacon that steadied her nerves. Meanwhile, Obesai's paranoia deepened. He noticed subtle changes, the nervous glances among the servants, the whispered conversations cut short when he approached. His distrust poisoned the household. Guards were doubled, the gates locked at all hours, and new chains of magic were woven around Amara, their cold power pulsing with renewed strength. Obesai's fear was a tempest, threatening to crush the fragile hope blossoming within the stone walls. Yet, the father's suspicion only fueled Amara's determination. She realized that the longer she remained chained, the stronger the curse would grow. The night of the escape arrived under a moonless sky. Darkness was their ally, cloaking movements and muffling sounds. Every heartbeat was a drum of tension. Ikon's ritual began with whispered incantations, a flicker of flame igniting in the distant wing. The household erupted in chaos, shouts, rushing footsteps, and clanging doors. Amara, her chains now softened by the magic she had learned to weaken, moved swiftly through the secret passages Kofi had revealed. Her breath was shallow, every shadow a potential threat. The cool night air whispered promises of freedom as she slipped past guards distracted by the fire. But the chains were not so easily broken. In the final corridor, as she reached the heavy wooden door leading outside, the metal links tightened, their magic resisting the release. Summoning every ounce of strength and the knowledge Ikon had imparted, Amara whispered the ancient prayers, feeling the iron grow warm and then loose. With a final, shuddering breath, the chains fell away. Freedom was within reach. Yet just as she stepped outside, a harsh voice froze her blood. Amara. Obesai stood silhouetted against the flickering light of the fire, eyes blazing with fury and fear. The escape was no longer just a flight, it was a confrontation. Every step forward was a step into the unknown, a challenge to the past and a reckoning for the future. The chains had been broken, but the ties that bound her family's secrets would take far longer to unravel. Beneath the pale glow of a slivered moon, the night hummed with a restless energy. The household was already unraveling, fires flickering in distant wings and voices raised in alarm, but amid the chaos, Amara's attention was drawn to a quiet corner of her room, a section of the floorboards that had always seemed slightly out of place, warped by time and wear. The scratches and dents on the wooden surface told stories of 1,000 footsteps, but beneath that surface, Amara felt a pulse, a heartbeat of secrets waiting to be unearthed. Her hands trembled as she knelt, the clinking of the broken chains still echoing faintly in her ears. The air was thick with dust and the scent of old wood, but beneath it lay something deeper, a whisper from the past, hidden away from prying eyes and the heavy burdens of her father's fear. Using a small knife Kofi had managed to sneak to her, Amara pried at the loose board, wincing as it creaked and shifted. The noise was risky, but the turmoil in the house swallowed her movements. After what felt like an eternity, the plank gave way, revealing a dark hollow beneath. Inside lay a worn leather-bound diary, its cover cracked and stained with age. Alongside it, a small ornate box carved with the same serpent symbol she had seen on her chains. Her fingers brushed the objects with reverence, as if touching the weight of forgotten truths. The diary belonged to her mother, a woman whose name had become a ghost in the family's story, erased by fear and silence. Amara opened the fragile pages carefully, the script faded but still legible, a window into a life filled with hope, love, and a desperate fight against the darkness threatening to consume them all. As she read, Amara uncovered a tale unlike any she had heard whispered in the village. Her mother had been a woman of strength and wisdom, a keeper of ancient knowledge and protector of the family's honor. She wrote of a curse, one born not of sin but of sacrifice, a dark shadow cast over the family to shield them from a greater evil. The diary revealed that Obesai's paranoia was born not of madness, but of love twisted by fear. Her father had chained her to protect her from forces far more dangerous than he had admitted, malevolent spirits that sought to consume their bloodline and erase their legacy. The serpent symbol, the intertwined triangles, they were not marks of shame but seals of protection, spells woven into the very fabric of their lives. Her mother's words spoke of a ritual, a binding made to hold back the darkness, a sacrifice that demanded vigilance and strength. But the diary also held warnings, of a betrayal from within, a secret kept too long that could unravel the protective magic. Amara's heart pounded as she realized that the chains were not just her prison, but a barrier against a terror that could engulf them all if broken prematurely. Beside the diary lay the ornate box, its carvings glowing faintly in the moonlight. Inside, Amara found a small pendant, a talisman of power and hope, passed down through generations. It was said to hold the key to breaking the curse, but only if wielded with courage and truth. The night's revelations shifted the weight of her struggle. Freedom was no longer just about escaping iron chains, but about confronting the shadows buried deep in her family's past and reclaiming a legacy tainted by fear. With the diary's words echoing in her mind, Amara felt a new resolve ignite within her. The secrets beneath the floorboards were more than hidden memories, they were the roadmap to her salvation, if only she could find the strength to follow it. As the fires burned and voices clamored above, Amara clutched the diary and talisman close. The night was no longer just a time of escape, but the dawn of a journey that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself, her family, and the chains that bound them. The true battle was just beginning. The night air lay heavy and still over the village, thick with the scent of wet earth and distant thunder. Inside the darkened walls of Obesai's household, every breath Amara took was measured, every sound a potential threat. The chains around her ankle, cold and unforgiving by day, now pulsed faintly with a deeper power, a spiritual force far older and more dangerous than mere iron could hold. Ikon's warnings echoed in her mind. The chains feed on fear, he had said. You must face them with courage or they will tighten their grip. Those words had been hard to believe for a girl who had known nothing but captivity and silence. Yet now, standing on the precipice of freedom, Amara understood what he meant. These chains were alive, not just metal but magic forged by ancient rites and bound with blood and fear. The room was cloaked in shadow, lit only by the faint glow of a dying candle. Amara's hands trembled as she reached down, brushing her fingers across the cold links. The carvings etched into each link twisted and writhed faintly, as if they sensed her resolve. She whispered the prayers Ikon had taught her, words of protection, of light piercing darkness, of ancestral strength rising to meet the challenge. As her voice grew steadier, warmth spread from the chains into her skin, and the iron seemed to soften. The spiritual hold they had over her began to waver, the magic that bound her lessening its grip. But the chains did not yield easily. A deep rumble rose from the shadows around her, and cold tendrils of doubt and despair reached for her heart, threatening to pull her back into helplessness. Images flickered in her mind, her father's face twisted in fear and anger, the whispers of village gossip, and the endless loneliness of her captivity. The chains tried to drown her in these memories, their magic feeding on her pain. But Amara clung to the flicker of hope Ikon had kindled in her soul. With every word spoken, every breath taken, she pushed back against the darkness. The runes on the chains glowed brighter, then suddenly sparked as if the magic itself was struggling to survive. Just as the power seemed to peak, a sudden noise shattered the silence, a shout from the other side of the house. The guards were alerted. Time snapped taut. Amara's heart leapt, but she steeled herself. She knew the chain's magic could not protect her if she stayed, she had to move now. Clumsily but with growing strength, she pulled the chains apart. The iron links resisted, but with a final surge of will, they snapped free with a ringing clang that echoed through the chamber. Her ankle marked by bruises but freed, Amara rose, a wild fire blazing in her chest. She wasn't just a prisoner anymore, She was a woman claiming her fate. Outside, the household erupted in chaos. Ekon's carefully laid plans kicked into motion as fire was set in the far wing, drawing guards away from the secret passage Kofi had discovered. The house trembled with the sounds of shouting, running feet, and the distant roar of flames licking at timber. Amara darted through dark hallways, guided by Kofi's steady hand and Ekon's whispered instructions. But the chain's spiritual power still clung to her, a shadow clawing at her mind, attempting to drag her back into despair. Every step was a battle not just against flesh and steel, but against unseen forces. At one moment as she neared the outer gate, the spirit-bound chains fought back fiercely. A wave of coldness swept over her, and for a heartbeat she felt paralyzed, caught in invisible bonds of fear and sorrow. Summoning every shred of courage, Amara grasped the talisman Ekon had given her, a small pendant etched with the serpent and triangle symbols. Its warmth spread through her palm, a beacon in the darkness. She whispered the ancient words again, drawing light into her soul. The invisible grip weakened and with a desperate push she broke free. Bursting through the heavy wooden door, Amara gasped at the open night air, the scent of rain, grass, and freedom washing over her like a balm. But her escape had not gone unnoticed. Obesai appeared at the threshold, his face a mask of fury and heartbreak. "Amara," he bellowed, his voice cracking with desperation. "You cannot run from what you are." Behind him, guards closed in, the night thick with tension. Amara faced him with unflinching eyes. "I am not what you fear," she said, voice steady. "I am what you tried to hide." The chains might have bound her body, but her spirit was unbreakable. The chase spilled into the village streets, a whirlwind of shadows and shouts. Villagers watched from their doorways, breaths held as the drama unfolded. Ekon and Kofi led Amara through secret paths known only to a few, their footsteps silent on the damp earth. At the edge of the forest, a final test awaited, a magical barrier born of old family curses and protective spells. The glowing runes shimmered faintly, blocking the path to freedom. Amara stepped forward, heart pounding. She held the talisman high and spoke the sacred incantations once more. The barrier flickered, then dissolved like mist. Freedom was hers. But the night had changed her forever. She was no longer just a girl in chains, but a bearer of ancient secrets and a challenger of curses. Behind her, Obesai's anguished cries faded into the distance, and ahead, the forest opened like an embrace, wild, untamed, and free. Amara took her first step into the unknown. The village had never seen such a gathering before, the entire community drawn together under the great baobab tree in the center of the square, murmurs buzzing like restless bees. Word of Amara's escape and the strange events unfolding at Obesai's household had spread fast, but what followed next would shake the village to its core. Ekon, the traveler who had arrived with secrets as heavy as the chains themselves, stood before the assembled villagers and elders. His eyes scanned the crowd, some curious, some fearful, and others skeptical. With a steady voice that carried the weight of years of study and truth-seeking, he began to reveal the story hidden beneath layers of silence and fear. The family's history, long shrouded in shadows, was no ordinary tale. It was a story of ambition, betrayal, and ancient pacts that had bound their fate in chains far heavier than iron. Ekon told of Amara's great-grandfather, Kofi, a man whose desire to protect his family led him down a perilous path. In a time when the village faced famine and misfortune, Kofi sought the aid of dark spirits, promising to barter the family's honor and bloodline in exchange for prosperity and protection. This was the origin of the curse, a binding that twisted their blood with both power and pain. The villagers listened, some gasping at the revelation, others shifting uncomfortably. The chains around Amara's ankle were not punishment for a crime, but a seal, a desperate attempt by her father and ancestors to contain a darkness threatening to consume them all. Obesai's actions, harsh as they were, stemmed from a deep-seated fear and a desire to protect both his daughter and the village. Yet, in his zeal to guard the secret, he had become both jailer and prisoner. The tale grew darker still. Ekon explained that the magic woven into the chains was bound by ancient runes, symbols representing protection, sacrifice, and the delicate balance between light and shadow. The family's curse was a legacy that had passed down through generations, silently shaping their lives and binding their fates. As the story unfolded, it became clear that Amara's imprisonment was not simply an act of cruelty but a burden born of necessity and sorrow. The villagers who had once whispered behind closed doors about the chain girl, now faced the raw truth, their fears, superstitions, and prejudices laid bare. Mothers clutched their children closer. Elders bowed their heads in silent reflection. Even those who had scorned Amara now felt the weight of the secret they had ignored for so long. Obesai stood at the edge of the crowd, his face pale and drawn. His gaze met Amara's for a brief moment, a silent exchange of regret, love, and the heavy cost of secrets kept too long. Ikon's words resonated with a call to action. The curse could be broken, but only if the village embraced truth over fear, healing over judgment. The story that had once bound Amara in chains now offered a path to freedom, not just for her but for the entire family and community. The village would never be the same. The truth unveiled was both a reckoning and a beginning, a chance to face the shadows and step into the light. Amara's story had become their story, a testament to the power of secrets and the strength found in breaking them. Amara's chains were broken, and the night air tasted sweeter than she had ever imagined. Freedom was hers at last, the open sky, the whispering wind, and the soft earth beneath her feet. But with that newfound freedom came a weight she hadn't fully anticipated, the price of truth. The village, once bound by fear and silence, was now alive with whispers, not of gossip alone but of judgment, suspicion and fear. The revelations Ikon shared had torn away the veil of ignorance, exposing secrets that many wished had remained buried. The legacy of the curse, the ancient pact, and the reasons for Amara's imprisonment had become the village's burden as well as hers. For Amara, freedom meant stepping into a world that no longer saw her as the chained girl, but as a symbol of a family's haunted past. Some villagers greeted her with sympathy, their eyes reflecting sorrow and regret for the suffering she endured. Others, however, viewed her with suspicion, believing that the curse she bore might bring misfortune upon them all. Her father, Obesai, had once ruled with a heavy hand, driven by fear and a desperate desire to protect. Now, stripped of his authority by the truths laid bare, he faced isolation and scorn. The very man who had chained his daughter was himself chained by guilt and the consequences of choices made long ago. Amara's family name became a double-edged sword, a symbol of both strength and sorrow. While some sought to distance themselves, others quietly offered support, recognizing that the path to healing was through unity, not division. Yet, freedom was not without its challenges. The curse's shadows still lingered, whispering in the edges of the village, and Amara knew the battle was far from over. She had inherited not just the chains but the responsibility to break the cycle of fear that had gripped her family for generations. Her nights were restless, haunted by dreams where the chains reformed, binding her once more, and by visions of the ancestors who had borne similar burdens. But with each dawn she grew stronger, bolstered by the support of those who believed in her and the knowledge passed down through her mother's diary. Amara began to speak openly about her story, transforming her pain into power. She gathered the village's women and elders, sharing the truths of the past and the hope for a future unbound by fear. Her voice, once silenced, now carried the strength of generations. The price of freedom was steep. Trust had to be rebuilt, wounds had to be healed, and old fears faced head-on. But Amara was determined to lead the way, knowing that breaking free meant more than escaping chains. It meant breaking cycles. Her father's repentance was slow and uncertain, a man struggling to reclaim his humanity. Together, they began the difficult journey toward reconciliation, confronting the shadows that had long divided them. The village itself began to change. The once whispered fears gave way to open conversations. The elders reconsidered old beliefs, blending tradition with new understanding. The curse, while still present in memory, lost its power to isolate and control. Amara's freedom became a beacon, a testament to the cost of truth and the courage to face it. Though the scars of the past remained, so did the promise of healing. In the face of judgment and suspicion, Amara chose to rise. Her story was no longer just about chains and curses but about resilience, forgiveness, and the strength found in embracing one's truth. Freedom had a price, but it was one worth paying. Amara stood at the edge of the village as dawn's first light painted the horizon in hues of gold and rose. The heavy shadows of the night, with their whispered fears and ancient curses, began to retreat under the warmth of a new day. The chains that once bound her body and spirit had been broken, but the real journey was just beginning. With the truth unveiled and her freedom claimed, Amara faced the immense task of rebuilding not only her own life but the fractured ties between her family and the village. The years of silence, suspicion, and fear had left deep scars, in hearts, homes, and histories. Yet Amara was determined to be the catalyst for change, to transform pain into healing and isolation into community. Her first steps were humble but deliberate. She returned to her father's house, now a place marked by sorrow and regret, and began the slow work of mending broken relationships. Obasai, humbled by the weight of his mistakes, welcomed her with a mixture of shame and hope. Together they shared stories, tears and memories, opening the doors that had long been sealed by silence. But healing was not theirs alone to forge. Amara reached out to the villagers, especially those who had once feared or scorned her. She listened to their stories, their fears and their hopes for the future. Slowly, walls built by years of mistrust began to crumble, replaced by tentative bridges of understanding. Central to this rebuilding was Amara's decision to share her mother's diary, the secret she had uncovered beneath the floorboards. Its pages, filled with wisdom, courage and ancient knowledge, became a beacon of hope and guidance. She invited elders and youth alike to read and reflect, to reconnect with traditions that honored truth over fear. Amara also embraced the legacy of the talisman, the serpent and triangle symbol that had guided her through the darkness. She crafted new charms and taught others the ancient prayers that had helped her break free. These rituals, once feared, became symbols of resilience and protection for the entire community. Her efforts extended beyond words and ceremonies. Amara organized gatherings where villagers could come together to share food, stories and laughter, reclaiming the joy that fear had stolen. She encouraged the women to learn the healing arts, the men to honor their ancestors, and the children to embrace their heritage without shame. Slowly but surely the village began to transform. The shadows that once loomed over every corner grew lighter, their whispers replaced by songs and celebrations. The story of Amara's escape and the unveiling of the family curse became a tale not of doom, but of courage and renewal. Yet Amara knew the journey was ongoing. The cycles of fear and silence were deeply rooted, and setbacks were inevitable. Some still whispered doubts, others clung to old superstitions. But with every step forward, Amara felt the strength of community, the power of truth, and the promise of a future unbound. She herself grew in ways she had never imagined, from a girl once chained in silence to a leader and healer, her spirit shining as brightly as the dawn. In the quiet moments before sleep, Amara reflected on how far she had come. The chains were gone, but their lessons remained, reminders of resilience, the cost of secrets, and the strength found in facing one's fears. With the rising sun warming her face, she whispered a vow to the winds, to never let silence imprison her or her people again. A new dawn had come, not just for Amara but for the village, for her family, and for all who dared to seek the light beyond the shadows. I remember the weight of those chains, not just the cold iron that bit into my skin, but the heavier chains of silence, fear, and secrets. For years they wrapped around me like shadows, binding me in ways no one else could see. Those chains told a story, one of pain, of hidden truths, and of a family haunted by its own history. I was trapped in a prison far larger than any room or shackled ankle. But the journey from those chains to courage was not simple. It was a path paved with doubt and fear, but also with quiet determination and unexpected hope. I had to learn that strength doesn't mean the absence of fear. Strength is standing up despite fear, is speaking the truth when silence feels safer, is choosing light when darkness is easier. At first I was just a girl, chained and forgotten. But somewhere inside me, a spark of defiance grew. It was fed by the whispered prayers Ekon taught me, by the talisman my mother left behind, and by the stories buried deep in my heart. Each day I learned more about the secrets that had bound my family for generations, the curses, the bargains with shadow spirits, and the fear that had turned my father into a jailer. Breaking those chains meant breaking through layers of lies and silence. When the truth finally came to light, it shook not only my world but the entire village. I saw faces change, from suspicion to understanding, from fear to empathy. Some hearts were slow to open and some never did, but many chose to walk with me toward healing. I learned that secrets, no matter how well kept, have a way of weighing down everyone they touch. They imprison not just the person who holds them but whole communities, families, and generations. But breaking those secrets free, telling the truth, can be terrifying. It means facing shame, anger, and sometimes isolation. Yet it is also the key to freedom. My father, once consumed by fear and control, had to face his own demons. His chains were different, forged from guilt and the desperate desire to protect. Our journey together was one of pain and forgiveness, learning that love can heal even the deepest wounds. The village itself began to change. Where once whispered rumors thrived, open conversations grew. Our elders began blending old traditions with new understanding, recognizing that heritage should be a source of strength, not a shackle. I became a voice, not just for myself but for all who suffer in silence. My mother's diary became a symbol of that voice, its pages a bridge between past and future. I shared its wisdom freely, hoping to inspire courage in others trapped by their own chains. This journey showed me that courage is not the absence of vulnerability but the willingness to be vulnerable. To stand in the light of truth even when it exposes pain. To forgive when forgiveness feels impossible. To hope when all seems lost. Though the chains are gone, the lessons they taught remain etched in my soul. I carry them as reminders that strength comes from struggle, that healing begins with honesty, and that freedom is a choice we must make every day. I look to the future with hope, a future where stories like mine are no longer whispered in fear but told in pride. Where families break cycles of silence and pain. Where communities support each other through darkness and into light. To anyone bound by chains, visible or invisible, I say your story matters. Your voice matters. Your courage can break even the strongest bonds. My journey from chains to courage is a testament to the power of truth, forgiveness, and resilience. It is a reminder that no matter how heavy the burden, no matter how dark the night, the human spirit can rise. This is my story. But it is also the story of many before me, and many who will come after. From chains to courage, from silence to voice, from fear to freedom. I am Amara. And I am free.